Okay, are we good?
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. And thank you, Debbie. It's wonderful to see you again. We're really excited about today's session and had such great feedback from the one from 2 weeks ago. Welcome again to everyone. It's 10 o'clock here Mountain Time. And wherever you're joining us, we're thrilled to have you as part of Tech Canada's Deeper Insights webinar series. The series comes live to you every 2 weeks on Thursday mornings, again or afternoon. If you're joining us from out east, I'm Katrina Popescu, Tech Canada's Marketing and Communications Manager, and I'm really excited to host this second session of a three-part series called Unleashing Your Leadership Potential. And of course, in case you missed part one of the series, not to worry, that happened 2 weeks ago, but all the concepts and insights do end up building on top of each other. And each session ultimately is designed to be really impactful on its own. So really glad to have you tune in with us today. And of course, if you want to catch up or you're looking to share either today's or the one from 2 weeks ago or the one coming up, you could visit our website at techcanada.com after the session, gain those insights, share them with your network. We'd love to have you here. And today's session, as you could see, is all about emotional intelligence. Of course, a critical component of effective leadership. And we're really honored to have Debbie Pearmain with us again to share her insights on this topic. Debbie, I know that your expertise and experience is, is very varied, and you've been doing this for many, many decades. So a very short bio. Of course, if there's anything I missed, please don't hesitate to share with our listeners. Debbie's an esteemed human resources consultant. She's a leadership coach, a highly sought after speaker and trainer, and has well over 25 years of experience working with CEOs and leadership teams. So we're really excited to continue learning from you, Debbie. And of course, as Debbie will go into this, emotional intelligence is really at the foundation of strong relationships, conflict resolution, sound decision-making, and success in any situation. So whether it's the personal or the professional, you're in the right place to be learning about this. With Debbie's guidance, we'll learn how to tap into this powerful tool and drive transformational success. Debbie, welcome. Thank you. So excited. I'll throw it over to you. Two quick things. We are recording this again, so if you've missed it or you have to step out early, do tune in back on our website. And second, we'll maybe take some natural pauses throughout the next hour to welcome any questions or comments that you might have. We'll be, of course, tuning in both here on Zoom and on our social media channels. Over to you, Debbie.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you so much for just a lovely, warm welcome. And I just also want to extend a warm welcome to everyone today who's joining us, whether you're here with us or you're again joining on social media. Great that you've been able to carve an hour into your day today just to invest in yourself. And I do believe this is part of our self-care, and it's just a really great gift that you can give to yourself. So thank you for joining us today. I do want to encourage participation, however you are comfortable. So please feel free at any time to type questions. You can send them to me privately, and we also can take questions and pause throughout our hour. Please don't wait and hold your questions to the end. And I'm also going to be looking for your input and your participation. So please make sure your chat is open and you are ready to participate that way. And also, if you ever want to, I would love to even have you ask questions or make comments throughout our time. You don't need to type things into the chat. So as was already mentioned, three-step process to unleashing your leadership potential. And it's really based on what we know from years of research in psychology. We started our last session with looking at the mind, our thinking, and how that contributes to our success. And that topic was positive intelligence. Now we move to emotional intelligence, and our last session will be atomic habits, which is all about behaviors. And so today the focus really is going to be on understanding what exactly is emotional intelligence, why does it matter, what are the components, and what are some simple actions that you can take after today to help you grow in your emotional intelligence. Now, this is not a new topic. In fact, I was looking on my bookshelf this morning. You can't see this very well, the Emotional Intelligence book by Daniel Goleman. This book has been around for at least 2 decades. So when I started in HR over 20 years ago, I was teaching on emotional intelligence as part of leadership development. Still, it's interesting to me that there are many organizations that are not teaching emotional intelligence to its leaders, even though we know that it has an 85% impact on your success in life. So just pause for a moment and think about that. And I would love to hear from the folks that have joined us today. When you think of this term emotional intelligence, what is your understanding of what it actually means? So, what is emotional intelligence? We're going to call it EQ for short, just like we call IQ or PQ, positive intelligence, intellectual intelligence. But what is your understanding of what EQ is all about? And feel free just to even type one-word answers into the chat. See your thoughts as they come in. Emotional intelligence, great. Yeah, it's getting to know your thinking, your biases. I'm going to say that really it's a lot about learning how to manage your feelings, right? So positive intelligence really dealt with thinking and thinking habits, and you did the assessment, I hope, on your saboteurs and getting to know the negative mindsets that are sabotaging you. And then we talked about calming, right? Calming those parts of our brain that prevent us from being able to do things like problem solve and make decisions and maintain composure. And that's really what emotional intelligence is all about. So it starts first, and thank you, Rita, with knowing your emotions, having an emotional vocabulary, and understanding where those emotions are coming from, and then having skills to be able to manage those emotions so that they don't sabotage your success and your happiness. The other component of emotional intelligence is then social awareness. So your ability to be aware of how other people are reacting or responding to you, and for you to be able to manage those relationships and interactions well. So I hope by just even hearing this definition, you have an understanding about why emotional intelligence is so critical for your leadership success. The good news is we can measure emotional intelligence. It's based on many factors, and we're going to look at a model today to help you do that. And it is a skill that you can learn, that you can grow, strengthen, and develop. So it's not a stagnant state. I've seen many people's careers be derailed because they lack emotional intelligence. And I've had the pleasure over 20 years of coaching lots of people to help them grow in their emotional intelligence, which has helped improve and increase their success. So why is all of this important? I'm just going to show, there's tons of research on this. Again, this topic's been around for 20 years. But what we do know is that it has a 58% impact on your job performance. A lot of careers are derailed because people have low emotional intelligence. Look at that number, 85% impact on your leadership success. We know from assessing people who have been identified as high potential or top performers that 90% of those people are high in their EQ. We know that if you want to be promoted, one of the key things that you can do is work on growing your emotional intelligence skills. And in fact, as I know, the war on talent right now is fierce. I can absolutely tell you that over the years, when I've been interviewing people for leadership positions, and I've got 2 people in front of me who are equal, right, in their experience, in their education, in their expertise and knowledge. How do I make a decision? How are HR folks making decisions about who has the potential to be the better leader? I use emotional intelligence assessments as part of the hiring process, and lots of organizations are doing that. Here's the thing, if we know this has such a huge impact, why are only 42% of companies providing leaders with training, providing employees with training on emotional intelligence competencies? So this brings us to our first poll of the day. And Stephen is helping me behind the scenes here. He's going to put up the poll. So thank you, Stephen. And the poll is simply, have your leaders had training on emotional intelligence in the last year? And just take a quick moment to do the poll. I'd love to see where we're at. And yes, your option is also yes, but over a year ago. So I've got lots of clients who will say to me, oh yeah, we did emotional intelligence training like 5 years ago. And they check off the box. And then I ask, well, how many new leaders have joined since you did that training? Have any of those folks had training in these areas? It has a huge impact on your success. So here we go, ending the poll. Thank you. And sharing the results. We can see that only 27% of people that are on our webinar today have had emotional intelligence training in the last year. I often get asked, because of the extensive work I've done in really prominent leadership development companies like Global Knowledge and Accenture and LHH Knightsbridge, I'm asked, what are the most important skills? If we had any budget for training this year, what should we be training people on? And this is actually how we came up with this 3-part series that we're offering to you. And my suggestion would strongly be, if you could do one piece of training, it would be positive intelligence. If you could do 2 pieces of training this year, it should be emotional intelligence. And of course, the 3rd piece of training I'm going to suggest is what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks, which is atomic habits. So thank you for that. I wanted to just show you also this model for emotional intelligence, which is really important. And this model is based on a company called MHS Systems, which the reason why I actually was certified in delivering these assessments for clients, but also in delivering training based on this model. The reason I chose MHS Systems is this. There are tons of like free assessment tools that you can use, that you can do online, that give you a little snapshot or insight into your emotional intelligence. What I can tell you about the assessments that MHS Systems does, if you haven't heard of this organization, they are one of the only scientifically valid and reliable emotional intelligence assessment tools in the marketplace. Now, there are others for sure. But after doing extensive research, I landed in certifying myself with MHS Systems tool. I love the assessment. And not only what's neat about the assessment, if you haven't heard of it before, is you will get a report that's very extensive with how you're doing in each of these components of emotional intelligence. But you also will get a report on your leadership potential based on your results. And what's neat is every person that I coach, I have them do these assessments as a starting point in our coaching journey, because as a coach, I also receive a report on how I can coach someone to improve their emotional intelligence. So this is an incredible resource. And I am just curious, based on the people who are here, how many of you have heard of MHS Systems, emotional intelligence reports or assessments? How many of you use them in your leadership development, in your hiring? I'd love to just hear from all of you. So just type a yes into the chat or a no if you've used this assessment, if you know of this assessment. And if not, one of the actions I'm going to suggest, thank you, Carol, that you do after today's session is look into this. I'm happy to chat with you further about it. I am authorized to be able to conduct these assessments for clients. And I'm happy to kind of walk you through the value of doing this assessment. So what do we learn from this assessment? We see all the different components of your emotional intelligence. And we see that emotional intelligence has categories like stress management, self-perception, self-awareness, your interpersonal skills, and also your problem solving and decision making. Yeah, lots of people are putting comments in here, which is great. And so as you're looking at this model, what I'd encourage you to do even now is just take a moment to assess yourself. So as you look at each of these categories and the elements within the categories, could you give yourself a score on a scale of 1 to 5? So when it comes, for example, to your stress management, how do you think or feel you're currently doing in that category? When it comes to your decision making, give yourself a score. When it comes to your interpersonal skills, give yourself a score. When it comes to your self-perception, when it comes to your interpersonal relationships. So just take a moment. I love scaling questions because they really help us just get a baseline assessment of where we're at. So hopefully you've got a pen and paper and you can just take a moment to reflect. And you can see within each of these elements that there are different aspects, right, of the component. So what I'd like to do now is just take a moment to see what your thoughts are on why these components matter when it comes to your leadership. So if we were, for example, to start with self-perception, if you had good self-perception, which means awareness of yourself, confidence in yourself, in your strengths, in your abilities, how would that help you to be a successful leader? If you had a high score in self-perception, why is that important for you as a leader? So I'd love to just hear your thoughts in the chat. Why does self-perception matter for leadership? So when you think of things like self-confidence and self-regard, if someone has low self-confidence, low self-regard, how might that negatively impact them as a leader? If you have low self-confidence and low self-regard, how might that negatively affect you as a leader, right? So I love to ask both sides of the question. How does self-expression help you to be a better leader? If you lack self-expression, what's the impact that that's going to have on your leadership? Great. And I'm loving all the comments that are coming in here. We can move on. Let's move on to self-expression. So if a leader is not good at communicating their thoughts, their needs, their ideas, at being assertive, how will that negatively affect them? If a leader is good and assertive in their communication with others, how would that positively affect them? What are your thoughts on that? And I'm even pausing just to allow you a moment to reflect on the question, right? So whether you put the answers in the chat or not, that's okay. I know it takes time to type, but just for you to take a moment and check in with yourself about why this is important. It's not enough for me just to say to you, if you want to be successful as a leader, you need to grow in these areas. The important piece is really connecting to the why and understanding how it either positively impacts you or negatively impacts you. What about stress tolerance? I mean, I can tell you that in the last 3 years, the topics I've taught on the most for my leadership clients are mental health, resiliency, stress management, burnout. Why is that so important as a leader? Why is it important for you to be good at managing your stress? Why is it important for you as a leader to be able to stay positive and hopeful and optimistic? And if you're not good at managing your stress, what kind of negative impact will that have on you as a leader? So again, just take a moment to reflect on that. If you want to share your ideas in the chat, that would be great as well. So great ideas coming into the chat, and thank you for that. And then we'll move on to this idea of interpersonal skills, which is really our ability to manage relationships with others well. So again, as you think about this, if you are strong in managing relationships with others, and not just people in your same generation or people with your same personality, right? I do a lot of training in companies on managing generational differences or managing different personality styles. Why is it important as a leader for you to be good at managing relationships with others? And if you're not good at managing relationships with others, how will that negatively affect you as a leader? So just taking a moment, checking in with you about why these components really matter to your leadership success. And lastly will be the category of decision making. So again, I just want you to think for a moment, what are the positive impacts of a leader being good at problem solving and adapting ideas and making decisions, collaborating well with others? And what would the negative impacts be if you weren't good in this area? As a leader, how might that negatively impact you? So as we've checked in with just why, right, all of these categories are important to us as leaders and why we would want to grow and improve and evolve in these areas, we also, because our decision maker in our brain is connected to the benefits or the consequences, we also need to connect in for ourselves about what the negative consequences would be for us not improving in these areas. And not just the negative consequences to us personally, but also the negative consequences to our team, to our organization, to our clients, to our customers. All of that self-awareness, right, is what's going to help you at the end of the day to make different choices and decisions to help you grow in your emotional intelligence. So I do just want to pause for a moment because I know that we've covered a lot already and we're almost at half of our time, and just ask you, what kind of questions do you have for me so far about emotional intelligence? So just pausing to see if there are any questions. And if there are no questions, I'll just give a moment here to see if there's anything coming in from social media. Katrinelle, do you see any questions coming in?
Nothing yet. A lot of great comments. And I had posted earlier, Mark from LinkedIn, when you were talking about training on EQ, said that he has enrolled 300 executives this year alone, which, Mark, that is amazing.
Yeah.
No questions so far, though.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I just want to echo Mark's comment, and I did see that, which is amazing. I'm just going to tell you that the majority of my clients are using the MHS system emotional intelligence assessment, not just because they're my clients. I often have people reach out to me to say, we want to do training on emotional intelligence. We want to do assessments on people. Do you offer this? So it's not because I'm necessarily bringing it to them. People are requesting that of me. So I want to just put that out there, that this is a really well-respected, researched assessment tool. And it's also the assessment tool that a lot of very highly esteemed leadership organizations are also using when they deliver their training. So if anyone's interested to learn more, please feel free to reach out. And let's get into now the different components. So the three key areas that we want to look at growing and developing for our emotional intelligence. And listen, we're coming at this at a very high level today. Half an hour. We'll probably spend 10 minutes on each subject. And so the first one is self-awareness.
Maybe, are you able to mute me?
Why is self-awareness so important? Because you and I cannot better manage what we're not aware of first. So it's really important for us to have self-awareness. And my question for all of you is, what do you do to help you grow in your self-awareness? What do you do to help you grow in self-awareness? So if we know that self-awareness is important because you and I can't manage what we're not aware of first, I would love to know the practices, right, that you have in order to help you grow in self-awareness. And then the other question would be, if you were coaching an employee, what would you want to do in order to help them grow in self-awareness? So I'm seeing some good ideas here, like taking inventory of yourself. So doing assessments of some kind, and there's all kinds of assessments out there. And like I said, I mean, you can go on Google today and literally take hundreds of free assessments on things like your personality, on your career interests, on your EQI, on all kinds of things. But what else could you do to help you grow in self-awareness? Yeah, listen to different self-development podcasts. That's a great idea. What else could you do? Thank you, Teresa. Asking for feedback from others absolutely helps you to grow in self-awareness. Journaling. Journaling is a great practice. I feel like so many people today could really benefit from journaling. What about things like meditation? Taking time for self-reflection. I mean, one of my favorite authors, I think lots of you know, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things that he talks about in his book is that great leaders regularly take time for self-reflection. So it's really important that you even just pause in your day, in your week. I encourage all the clients I coach to set up a half an hour every week, just to pause and reflect on their week. How are they doing? What's working? What's not working? How are they feeling? Why are they feeling that way? So taking time to regularly grow in self-awareness. And as you can see up here, your ability to know yourself is probably one of the most important traits that you can have, not just as a leader, but as a human being. Many of the folks that I coach come to me because they're struggling to manage different aspects of their lives. And the only way that we can learn to better manage anything is to back up and first start from a place of better awareness and understanding. When it comes to emotional intelligence, the research says only 36% of people can accurately identify their emotions. A lot of people are what we call emotionally illiterate. They don't have language. They don't even have awareness or understanding of what emotions they're experiencing or why. So lots of ideas up here of how you can grow in self-awareness, paying attention to the things that trigger emotions in you. Right? So if you feel angry, it's to pause and reflect afterwards and ask yourself, why did I feel angry? What was happening or not happening in that moment for me? What is that helping me learn or understand about what's important for me or about what I need? Feelings are our friends. They actually are a part of our human experience to give us information, right? So feelings give us information. And our job is to get to know the feelings that we're having and to understand why we're having the feelings that we're feeling. And then learn ways and strategies to help us better manage and process those feelings so that we don't stay stuck in the feelings. Another thing that I learned when I did my social work degree about feelings is that, feelings are like a wave. They go up and they come down, and they vary in intensity. So there absolutely is a process that we need to have to help move feelings through our bodies, through our systems. And the key to emotional intelligence is not just to be aware of the feelings when they happen, but to then have strategies to be able to manage those feelings so that we can pause and choose the proper response that we want to have in that situation. I'm sure by now you've already read some of the other ideas of things that you can do to help you grow in self-awareness. One of my favorites that I often suggest to my clients is to even just start paying attention to the things that resonate for them or that they relate to in TV shows or in movies or in books that they read. That is what gives them information. Why is that resonating for them? What is that telling them about them? What is it telling them about what they need, about how they think, about how they feel? So I do want to pause for a moment and just ask if anyone has any questions on developing self-awareness. I think the real takeaway here about self-awareness is that this is something that we need to intentionally set aside time to cultivate for ourselves. This is not magically going to happen. I feel like most people today are living on autopilot, and they're just going and going and going and running and running and running. And when we live and operate that way, there's all kinds of things that go on and happen, and we're not consciously even aware. So in order to grow in self-awareness, we need to hit the pause button regularly and set aside time in our day, in our week, in the busyness for some reflection, and have some good open questions that you can use to even just prompt some of your self-reflection. One of the tools that I actually recommend to help people grow in self-awareness is actually just to purchase off of, Amazon or at your local bookstore, what's called a CBT workbook. So CBT stands for cognitive behavior therapy. Why I love these workbooks is because they literally come with prompts. They come with the questions. So it's kind of a way to coach yourself. Another way to help you grow in your self-awareness would be to spend time with a coach who's going to ask you questions, to give you a chance to think and reflect, or also counseling. And thank you so much for your comment here, Jennifer. Absolutely. DBT is another great strategy which counselors do. Dialectic behavior therapy. I've actually had the pleasure of doing that myself, and I can absolutely tell you that it was really helpful in helping me better learn and understand about myself. So lots of options out there, lots of places that we can get support. So I just want to pause for a moment and just give you an opportunity for self-reflection. I want you to just take a moment to think about a current situation that you are experiencing. And you could think about a work situation, you could think about a personal situation. It doesn't really matter. Last session, we talked about positive intelligence. And so it was, what are all the thoughts that you're having about this situation? Today's focus is, what are the feelings that you're having about this situation? So just take a moment to reflect on the situation and to reflect on the feelings that come up for you as you think about the situation. How do you know that those are the feelings you're having? So I really want you to pay attention to the physical sensations that you're experiencing in your body that give you information, that help you understand that that is the feeling that you're having. And even just take a moment to pay attention to where in your body you're feeling this. So as an example, if I were to think about a current situation in my life right now, when I think about that situation, immediately I feel energy moving in my stomach. And maybe we could say that that is like butterflies, right? And so what does that then tell me? That this is something that I feel uncertain about or anxious about, or even a little stressed and worried about. So the first step in growing in emotional intelligence is growing in your literacy of your feelings and your feeling language. Some of the folks I coach need help with this. Lots of people who I coach say to me, Debbie, I am so aware of my feelings. That is not what is challenging for me. What is challenging for me is I struggle to manage my feelings, right? So I'm just curious for all of you who are on our webinar today, is it easy for you to know and identify and label your feelings? Could you just type a Y in the chat if it's yes, or an N in the chat if it's no? If you struggle to know, label, feel your feelings, that is the place that I'd like to encourage you to invest some time and energy in learning more about. Lots of us have that literacy already. So a lot of you are chiming in here already saying that understanding your feelings, your sensations, where you have them, when you have them is easy for you. And so the next step in growing in your emotional intelligence is then this concept called self-management. And what I've said to you here is feelings really are our friends. They give us information about what's working, not working, what we need, what's important to us, what our values are. So we need to pay attention to them. We need to become more aware of the things that trigger us, and then stay composed, be able to pause, not allow our feelings to rule and reign and create reactions, but we want to develop what we call emotional self-regulation so that we can choose the best response for the situation. How many of you feel that you have good self-regulation? So when you feel anxious, can you manage and control it? When you feel angry, can you manage or control it? When you feel sad, can you manage or control it? Can you feel those things and manage those feelings and process those feelings in healthy ways? Or do some of your feelings control you? So all of us vary in our skill level of self-regulation. And there's a lot of things that impact our ability to self-regulate. And so my question for all of you is, first of all, to reflect which feelings are easy for you to manage, which feelings do you struggle to manage? So again, creating awareness. How we go about managing anger might be slightly different from how we go about managing anxiety or managing sadness or managing grief. So we have to first identify what feelings do we struggle to manage. Part of how you can help yourself do that, again, is to grow in the awareness of the intensity of the feeling. So when you experience a situation, when you're around a certain person, right, on a scale, what is the level of the feeling that you experience with that person or in that situation? So is it like a 5 out of 10, a 7 out of 10, or a 10 out of 10, right? And depending on the level of the feeling, that'll impact your ability to manage it, and you're going to need to have different strategies. So my question for all of you is, again, to reflect on this topic, what do you currently do to help you manage your feelings when you're triggered? So what works for you? And I'd love each of you just to type one thing into the chat. Hopefully you've got more than one strategy. That's part of why you're here today. But I'd also just love to hear, because there's at least 20 of you, if not more, on social media. What are the things that work for you to help you, right, when you notice that you've been triggered? So what I'm seeing here is to notice the feeling and name it. So I love that. I mean, this goes way back to what they even teach now in schools. Name it to tame it, right? So let's not avoid it. Let's not stuff it. Let's actually name our feeling, because as we name it, we are validating it for ourselves, which is actually a really important part of emotional processing. Carol, I love that you said EFT tapping. In fact, even before this webinar today, I did EFT tapping. It is one of my favorite tools in my toolbox for feeling management. And I do EFT tapping pretty much every day. And there's different tapping sequences, different affirmations that you can say as you're doing the tapping. And I'm curious, like, as we're even talking about EFT tapping, how many of you have even heard of this? There's a lot of people I coach, I teach EFT tapping, who have never heard of it, who don't even know what it is. And EFT tapping, if you haven't heard of it, is emotional freedom technique. And again, it's based on tons of research, lots of science. And one of my favorite books is called The Tapping Solution. But you can also, for example, follow The Tapping Solution on Instagram. So when I said I do tapping almost every morning, Carol, I don't know if you're with me on this, but I wake up and I'm on Instagram and I go to The Tapping Solution, and they always have some kind of tapping solution for the day. And I take a few minutes at the beginning of each day to do it. Very helpful for managing and regulating emotions. And a lot of that is based on acupressure points. So if you haven't heard of it, it's a great strategy. I also am seeing lots of other good ideas here, things like humor. So maybe you think of something that's funny in the moment, so it's a distractor for you. I think that's great. Yes, talking to people, venting, getting it out helps you to process, gain perspective. Physical activity, get up, take a walk, go drink a glass of water, do something, move your body. Moving your body helps move the physical sensation through your system. There's lots of brain chemistry that's involved in feelings. So movement, any kind of movement, is powerful for moving feelings. Dancing, drawing, art, music, taking deep breaths. Some of the best things that you and I can do that are absolutely free is simply just to take a moment and inhale slowly. I usually do about 5 deep breaths to help reset my nervous system when I'm triggered. I think I mentioned in our last session that I saw someone once who had a PhD in self-regulation. And one of the most important things that they taught me was about tuning in when I'm triggered, paying attention to my breathing, also counting, right? So the breathing helps the nervous system calm down. It also sends a message to your brain that you are safe and you are okay. As soon as we're triggered and we feel threatened, our breathing changes. which sends a message to our brain that we are under attack, that we are under threat, which then just heightens our emotional reaction and our emotional response. I'm seeing lots of other good ideas here. So things like removing yourself from the situation, I think that's great. The timeout is really important. And I've also just put some other ideas up here. Box breathing is great. And yes, Katrinelle, I was going to pause and just ask if anyone has any questions about emotional regulation. This is what I feel my clients and myself struggle with the most. So what kind of questions are there about emotional regulation?
What I seem to be seeing both between our social media listeners and certainly here is that perhaps there's a bit of a difference between how people show up and manage to regulate their environments and themselves at work versus personally. Could you maybe address what might be a technique or something that individuals and certainly leaders can do to manage between the two situations, or would you give them this list regardless of where they find themselves?
Okay, well, there's a couple of reasons why that happens. So, number one, when we feel safe, when we feel emotionally safe, we are more authentically ourselves. And this is why, for example, I mean, I don't know how many of the people on this webinar today have children. This is why literally you can have worries or concerns about your kids because of how they are showing up at home. And so you might be concerned and set up an appointment to go talk to their teacher. How many of you have done this when your kids were little? Only to hear from your teacher that your child is an angel and your child is so well behaved at school and your child cooperates well and your child waits their turn. And you're thinking to yourself, what? That is not at all the experience that I have in my home with this same person. Why is that? There's a lot of research that tells you that it's because we learn to mask. It's a learned skill. So in public, in professional settings, the masking is a learned behavior. In the home environment, the child feels safe. Their defenses are down. They can truly relax and they can be themselves and just let it all out. So in fact, it's actually healthy to let that happen because a lot of people are bottling up, right? All their true feelings in their workday. When this kind of behavior spills over into the workplace, and I teach workshops for leaders on understanding and supporting mental health. When we start to notice these problematic emotions coming up in the workplace for people, that is typically a symptom that that person's resistance is really low. It could be a sign of burnout. It could be a sign of a mental health struggle. So if someone is not able to mask in the workplace, in a professional setting, right? It's literally because their capacity to handle their emotions has really decreased. That is a concern, and it's something to notice and pay attention to and address. When I teach leaders on managing mental health in the workplace, I often say that by the time this stuff shows up at work, the person is much further down the continuum of mental health than what you're seeing at work. Why? Because we've been socialized in our society to put our best face forward in the workplace. So this is not something for you to just wait and see or take lightly. This is really a sign that a person is struggling. If they are demonstrating this at work, you can only imagine what's happening behind closed doors at home. So it is a skill that we can learn, but we all have a certain capacity, right, for handling all the stresses of our life. And when we reach that capacity, what happens naturally is that our emotions spill over. But they also tend to spill over more in the places and with the people that we feel the safest to. So, what is a strategy to help if this is something that you're noticing or it's happening to you? What I really want to encourage is just more self-care. And so on the left, you can see a long list of things that you and I can do daily to help us better regulate our emotions so they don't build up, so they don't spill over, so they don't blow up, so they don't deflate us completely. I teach a lot and coach a lot on mental health. And I do want to say that when people are struggling with their mental health, when people have things like a diagnosed anxiety disorder or depression or post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder or ADHD, there's lots of neurological conditions that impact a person's ability to self-regulate. So even though you do all the things on the left side of this list, if you still aren't able to effectively self-regulate, I want to encourage you that there's a lot of positive things that you can do on the right side of the list that will help even more. So you're probably seeing up here things like EMDR. A lot of people have never heard of that. That is a kind of therapy that is very successful for people with anxiety, with PTSD, people who are struggling with grief. So I again, if that's you, and I coach a lot of people who come to me because they want help with self-regulation. And some people have undiagnosed conditions. I would encourage you to see your doctor. You know, if you're sleeping and eating healthy and exercising and you don't have any addictions and you meditate and journal and, you know, do all the things and you're still struggling to self-regulate, I often encourage my clients to go talk to their doctor, to go talk to a counselor. And as you can see, I mean, even things like understanding about your vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is critical to self-regulation. And when your vagus nerve is not toned and not healthy, it actually leads to something called emotional dysregulation. So there's many people, for example, who have never even heard of that. And there are exercises that you and I can do to help tone our vagus nerve. Different yoga poses are excellent for helping with that. And what they do is help tone the nervous system. So again, I do want to pause because this is a huge area. We are learning so much more through neuroscience, through neurophysiology, and there are way more therapies and treatments available for people today than there were 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, that can help you with emotional regulation. Somatic therapy is another really good therapy. Compassionate inquiry, medication is often needed for folks who struggle with emotional regulation. So again, just pausing, are there any questions on this? What I always encourage my clients to do is first take a look at the list on the left side and really check in with themselves and ask themselves if they are consistently doing these things daily. If you are, you should be seeing emotional regulation results. If you're not seeing the results, then what I encourage you to do is consider there might be something more going on for you, right? And this is then where I think reaching out to a coach, to a counselor, to a doctor, and getting more information would be helpful. Another thing that I think is really helpful for helping people regulate their stress and their emotions are adaptogens. How many of you have even heard of adaptogens? How many of you use adaptogens, which are supplements that can help your nervous system? So when I'm saying adaptogens, I'm thinking of things like there's all different kinds of really healthy mushrooms like lion's mane, cordyceps. that help that nourish the brain and the nervous system. There's things like ashwagandha, there's holy basil. These all help the HPX axis, right, in our brains that help emotional regulation. There's things like magnesium. So I am curious in the chat, how many of you are even aware of these things? How many of you take these things, these supplements, to actually help manage your cortisol levels, to help you manage your stress responses? There's a lot of healthy things, right, that we can do beyond the things on the left side. So is anyone here familiar with things like GABA or holy basil or ashwagandha or ginseng or different types of mushrooms, not the crazy mushrooms, but the mushrooms like cordyceps and lion's mane? They're all very good for helping your body, your adrenal glands, your nervous system adapt to the stressors around you. Any questions before we move on? So the last place that we're going to look at today, or the last aspect of emotional intelligence, is about having good relationships. So remember, we said the components to emotional intelligence are really self-awareness, self-management, and relationship management. And relationship management is a huge topic. There's a lot of skills that are required for you and I to be good at managing relationships. When I do leadership development training in companies, there's a huge focus on what we call people management skills, right? So everything from communication to conflict management to prioritization to managing personality styles. But I will absolutely say to you, in the 20 years I've been in HR, we absolutely know today that leadership is all about influence. It's no longer about authority. And so what we need to do is really understand people and what has influence over people. Well, all the research tells us that when you have a good relationship with someone, you have more ability to manage them, to influence them and their behavior and their choices. Just think about that for a minute, right? Think about someone you have a good relationship with. What are you willing to do for them? Think about someone you don't have a good relationship with. What are you willing to do for them? So I spend a lot of time in leadership development training and coaching with my clients, helping people understand that the key to their success as a leader is having a good working relationship with the person they're managing. So we go to psychology again, and we say to ourselves, okay, if we're talking about attachment theory, right, which is really the theory behind relationships, what is that based on? And the two key things, which I don't think any of you are surprised to hear, is trust and respect. Trust and respect. So I can tell you that I've had hundreds of conversations over the years with folks who are struggling to manage different employees. And the first question I'll ask them is, do you know if this person trusts you? How do you know that? Do you know if this person respects you? How do you know that? Let's get an assessment or a baseline of that first. Because my guess is the reason you're struggling to manage this person is because the trust or the respect has kind of gone offline somehow. Can you think about that? When did it go offline? Why did it go offline? And then the question is, what do you need to do to gain back the trust and the respect with that person? So often, managers focus so much on trying to manage the behavior. And that is the wrong place to focus, right? The more behavior challenges you have with a person, the more that is an indicator that the trust and the respect in the relationship is broken. So then the question for you is, what happened? Why? How do we repair that? And if you want to grow trust and respect with others, what are the things you need to do more of? What are the things you need to do less of? And so even as you're sitting here hearing me say this today, right, I want to leave you with that. Think about the people you manage. Think about the level of trust that you have with them, the level of respect, and think about things that you could do to help improve that. So we are at the end of our time together. And again, I said to you, this is a really high level flyby overview. Each of these topics could literally be a 2-3 hour session. I do just want to pause to ask if there are any final questions before we finish up our webinar today. Have you seen any questions, Katrinelle, come in?
Nothing through LinkedIn. However, a very busy hour with lots of questions and lots of engagement. So thank you again, Debbie. So many takeaways from your very insightful questions to the suggestions around that workbook and some of the breathing practices, and of course the 2 lists that you had that we could all take away and put into place both professionally and in our work, in our homes. So thank you. Of course, again.
I was going to encourage everyone to join us for our 3rd session on atomic habits, which will be happening in 2 weeks' time.
Perfect. You beat me to it. So thank you. Looking forward to having everyone join us then. And of course, if you came in partway through or had to leave early, please don't forget you could definitely catch this webinar and Debbie's first one from 2 weeks ago on our website at techcanada.com. And thank you again for all of your comments. Thank you, Debbie, for your very, very insightful information. You're right. I feel like we could have at least done another hour of this. So looking forward to part 3. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you again in a few weeks. Bye for now.